Your public speaking textbook begins the chapter, the very first chapter, with the idea that the Old English proverb says, talk is cheap. What do you think that proverb means? Talk is cheap. How many of you have ever been asked by your parents to do something, said you would do it, and then didn't follow through and do whatever that thing is? Maybe it's cleaning your room, picking up a sibling after school, getting dinner started. But you said something and then not followed up on it. Talk is cheap. If my friend called me and said, hey, I'm going to be moving soon, you've got a good car, would you mind helping me move? And I said, oh sure, I'm really good at moving, I'll be glad to help you. And I think it's going to be the end of the month, and then she calls me today and says, hey, can you help me move tomorrow? Ooh, tomorrow's not good. Oh my gosh, I'm having dinner with my cousins, I'm going to a gymnastics meet, tomorrow's not going to work. I could do it Sunday. Oh, Sunday's too late. I'm sorry. Talk is cheap. So that's what the proverb means. But the question is talk cheap in America today? That's what we're here to learn about during the semester. So is talk cheap in America today? Does anybody have any idea who one of the wealthiest women in America is? You're right. Oprah Winfrey. Yes. And how did she start her empire? She's a very, very successful businesswoman, but how did she start her empire? She started it because she had a lot of skill at communicating. She talked. Does anybody have any idea what the salary is for some of our top paid news anchors on the national news networks? $3 million, $4 million, $2 million. It's talk cheap. How about people who are paid to speak? Does anybody know what our former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton gets for a speaking engagement? Often around $25,000 for a single speaking engagement. Wow. But you're thinking to yourselves, I am never going to be a presidential candidate. I'm never going to be a CNN anchor. Talk is going to be cheap for me. How about motivational speakers? Does anybody have an idea what motivational speakers are paid? We had a man 20 years ago that came and spoke at the park. We paid him $3,000 for 2 assemblies in the morning. He then went on to another school district in the afternoon and made another $3,000 there. How many days a week do you have to work if you are making $6,000 a day? I looked him up. His name's Mark Scherenbrock. Now, 20 years later, he's making between $15,000 and $20,000 per speaking engagement. So, is he a retired athlete? Is he a former president? No. He's just a man from Minnesota who's good at communicating. That's it. And he makes $15,000 to $20,000 per speaking engagement. Is talk cheap? I don't think so. So the next question would be, how about you? How many of your parents have a job where communication is important to them? Any of your parents in sales? Any of your parents in education? Any of your parents in law? Any of your parents in a job where their livelihood is determined by how well they communicate? I know I am. I've had a successful career because, in part, I am a successful communicator. So for me, talk is not cheap. How many of you have a job right now? Do you like that job well enough that you think you want to keep this job for the next, 50 years or so? You're laughing. You don't picture yourself doing this job when you're 60 years old or 65 years old, or even for some of you 30 years old. So what are you going to have to do to get a better job? In addition to getting skills, you are going to have an interview. What will you have to do at that interview? You will have to speak. You will have to communicate. For you, talk will not be cheap. How many of you know for sure right now you are never ever going to be pulled over by the police for making a right-hand turn on red, for going through a yellow light, for not noticing that a new speed limit was established on a road you're on, or being in an unfamiliar place and making a turn when you're not supposed to make a turn? Could that happen? Could you have a neighbor that you have to go to court about? Somebody moves in, they're not taking care of their property, you have to go to court. What are you going to have to do when you get to court? You're going to have to speak on your own behalf. And the more successful you are, the more likely you are to have the outcome you'd like. The stronger you are at speaking, the more it's going to matter. You may not have to pay fines, you may not have to have points. All of those things will matter. Talk will not be cheap. How many of you can say for sure right now you're never going to have a child in your life that may need you to speak on their behalf? Sitting here at 17, you don't know what's going to come in your life. But what I can guarantee will come is there's going to be a time in your life when you're going to say, I am so glad that I have speaking skills. It may be when you're in a college class where you have to present something. It may be when you have to advocate for yourself with a professor. It may be when you have a group presentation and you have to present the information. It may be when you're at a job and you're working in a small group and a supervisor is watching to see who's the most effective communicator in that small group. Talk will not be cheap. Some of you may choose a career in sales. Talk will not be cheap. You will have an opportunity to be more effective as a salesperson if you are a good communicator. In my early years of my career, I worked at a retail store, and it was a commission-based job. I worked 2 days a week. Most of the employees worked 5 days a week. I only worked the weekends. Most weeks, I made more than any other employee at that store because I was good at communicating. I made more in commission. I was a top salesperson because I was a good communicator. For me, talk was not cheap. You don't know where your life is going to go. You don't know what is going to happen. But I can guarantee you one thing. There will be at least one, probably many times in your life, where you are going to be glad that you had a public speaking class. That you are going to be glad when you learn how to organize your ideas, that you learn how to gain the confidence to stand in front of people and present that information, and you learn how to develop relationships and confidence that's going to help you your whole life. So while the Old English proverb may say talk is cheap, public speaking and talk in America is not cheap.